My name is Adelaide Moore. I'm 32 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I had a stable, predictable life. Not perfect. No one's life is perfect, but secure enough that the idea of something catastrophic blindsiding me seemed impossible. Lucas and I had been together for 4 years. We met in grad school, the way people in their late 20s often do. Two over-caffeinated strangers fighting for the same table in a library basement. He apologized. I joked about charging rent for the table's usage, and 8 hours later, we were sharing cold pizza outside under a flickering lamppost. For a long time, he made me feel like I'd finally found someone who matched me stride for stride. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady. Eventually, steady grew into comfortable. Comfortable became partnership. Last spring, partnership turned into engagement. It felt like the natural progression everyone expects. Graduate, work, live together, get engaged, plan a future. Or what I thought was our future. I work in healthcare administration. My schedule is painfully routine. Monday to Friday, occasional emergencies, no real surprises. Lucas works in marketing at a mid-sized tech company where everything is apparently a launch or a campaign or a critical deadline. His schedule was always looser, unpredictable. At first, I admired how flexible and adaptable he was. Later, I learned flexibility is a double-edged sword. It can hide a lot. But I didn't know any of that yet, at least not consciously. It all started on a Friday afternoon. I was finishing a pile of end-of-quarter reports when my phone buzzed. Lucas, working all weekend on a huge deadline. Can't be disturbed. I didn't think twice. I texted back. Me. Okay, I understand. Good luck. Love you. Nothing unusual. He'd worked through weekends before. I told myself I'd use the quiet time to catch up on reading, maybe finally watch that documentary series he hated. I thought I was being a supportive fiancé. That's what a good partner does. Gives space when space is needed. But hindsight is cruel. It teaches you how blind you truly were. Later that evening, while I cooked dinner for one, I remembered something small, an old conversation from months earlier when he'd mentioned his ex-girlfriend, Marissa. He'd been vague about their breakup, only saying they grew apart and wanted different things. I didn't push. I respected boundaries. But I remember the way he said her name, that slight tightness, the kind you don't notice until you know to look for it. Back then, I dismissed it. I wanted to believe Lucas had chosen me completely. That tiny thought, Marissa, flashed like a ghost in my mind. But just as quickly, I pushed it away. I didn't want to be that insecure partner, the paranoid type, the kind who assumes the worst. Saturday morning, I woke with sunlight pouring across the bed, Lucas's side empty and cold. I made coffee, settled into my favorite blanket, and opened a book I'd been trying to finish for months. Then my laptop chimed. I expected some automated work reminder. Instead, the subject line froze me. Concerned about Lucas, from Danielle Reynolds. I opened it instantly. Danielle was Lucas's boss. We'd met twice, once at a company event, and once when I'd helped coordinate a surprise birthday lunch for him. She struck me as direct, composed, the kind of woman who remembers everything you say. Her email was long, apologetic, and strange. She said Lucas had requested the weekend off for a family funeral and that she'd been unable to reach him. She didn't want to be insensitive, but the company urgently needed something for the Stanton project. I reread the email 3 times. Family funeral? No one in Lucas's family had died. I had spoken to his mother 2 days earlier about potential floral arrangements for the wedding. She'd asked about centerpiece pricing. She was cheerful, unconcerned, very much alive, as were all of his relatives. My confusion twisted into something darker, something sharp. Why would Lucas lie about a funeral to his boss? Why lie to me about working? I felt heat crawl up my spine, an instinctual warning. My hands shook as I set the laptop aside. I texted Lucas. Me. Hey, everything okay? Your boss emailed me. No response. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. A pit formed in my stomach, the kind I'd ignored before, always chalking it up to stress or overthinking. But this time, it didn't feel like overthinking. It felt like recognition. Against my better judgment, I opened Instagram. Most of our circle overlaps. Friends from school, co-workers, people we'd met at weddings or weekend trips. I tapped through a few stories mindlessly until one name stood out. Kira, a mutual friend, loud, messy, the type to document everything. She'd posted several stories that morning, and as soon as the first one loaded, my blood turned to ice. There was Lucas, standing by a pool, laughing, holding something bright blue in a plastic cup, wearing a swim outfit I'd never seen. The tagged location, Lake Havasu, Arizona. We live in Pittsburgh. Another tap, another video, more people, more drinks, more dancing. And then her, Marissa, her hand resting casually on Lucas's waist. Their bodies angled toward each other like gravity was pulling them together. The caption was nauseating. Weekend crew, no responsibilities. I felt something inside me fracture with a quiet, devastating finality. All at once, everything shifted. The lies, the inconsistencies, the missed calls, the vague explanations, the sudden late meetings, the emotional distance. Every puzzle piece clicked painfully into place. My fiancé wasn't working. He wasn't grieving. He was in Arizona at a pool party with his ex-girlfriend. And I was the one sitting alone, believing every word he fed me. A sound escaped my throat, half sob, half laugh. The kind you hear from someone trying not to break. The coffee on the table beside me had gone cold. So had I. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. Betrayal is not a sharp pain, not at first. It's a slow, creeping numbness that starts at your chest and spreads out until everything feels unreal. That was the moment the life I knew ended. But I didn't know yet just how deep the lies went. I didn't know that in fewer than 24 hours, I would send the email that would detonate everything Lucas thought he could get away with. I didn't yet know that his ex-girlfriend would send me a message that would confirm the worst, or that I would eventually discover this weekend was not their first. All I knew, sitting alone on a quiet Saturday morning, was that the person I trusted most in the world had chosen someone else, chosen recklessness, chosen deceit. And that choice was about to tear our lives apart. For a long time, I didn't move. My phone lay face down beside me on the couch, buzzing occasionally with spam emails or news notifications, but not from Lucas. Not a single call, not a single text. Meanwhile, the videos kept looping on Kira's story until they disappeared into the algorithm. Each replay felt like a slap I willingly walked into. I couldn't stop watching. A new clip had been added a few minutes earlier, Kira lying on a pool float, camera panning lazily across the deck. For a moment, it was harmless umbrellas, glittering water, bodies sunbathing. Then the camera drifted to them. Lucas and Marissa were on the edge of the pool, feet in the water. Lucas leaned toward her, saying something I couldn't hear. Marissa laughed and nudged his shoulder with playful familiarity, like this wasn't new, like this wasn't taboo, like this wasn't happening behind the back of the woman he was supposed to marry. My breath caught as Marissa's hand traced down his arm. There was no ambiguity, no innocent interpretation. This wasn't a group trip where he happened to run into an ex. This was something curated, intentional, secret. And he'd chosen to lie to me, twice, for it. I swallowed hard, pushing away the sting of humiliation. But humiliation is insidious. It climbs into your lungs, makes you feel small, even when logic tells you someone else should feel shame. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I forced myself to screenshot everything. My hands trembled as I captured each post, each tag, each angle of Lucas that verified location and timeline. I screenshotted the email from Danielle, the text where he'd sworn he'd be unreachable. I wasn't trying to gather ammunition. I was trying to convince myself I wasn't imagining this, that I wasn't making a mountain out of a molehill, that I wasn't being paranoid. Because part of me still wanted to believe the man I loved wasn't capable of this level of deceit. But the proof was overwhelming. He is at a pool party with his ex. He lied about work. He lied about a funeral. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. It was the moment where emotion and logic collide violently. Something inside me snapped into clarity. I needed to respond to Danielle's email. Not because I wanted to sabotage Lucas, not because I was vindictive, but because she deserved to know the truth, and because Lucas had backed me into this corner without my consent. He had dragged me into his lie, and now I had to choose between silently enabling it or stepping out of its path. I opened a new email. I hesitated. Should I? Would this make things worse? Would this ruin his job? Would this ruin me? Then a quiet, steady thought rose in my mind. He already ruined everything. You're just holding up a mirror. My fingers moved before I could stop them. To Danielle Reynolds. Subject, concerned about Lucas. Danielle, thank you for reaching out. I'm attaching screenshots that clarify the situation. There is no family funeral. Lucas is currently in Lake Havasu. I was told he'd be working all weekend. I'm as surprised as you are. Adelaide. I paused for exactly 30 seconds, long enough to feel the weight of the decision, long enough to consider deleting it all and pretending I didn't know anything. Then I hit send. A soft click, a finality, a detonator. I closed my laptop immediately, as if shutting it could erase what I'd done. But the moment the lid shut, a suffocating silence filled the room. I couldn't sit still. My apartment, our apartment, felt tainted, humid, claustrophobic, like the air was poisoned with the remnants of a lie. I grabbed a jacket, slipped into my shoes, and walked out the door without a destination. The late summer air hit me like a slap, hot, sticky, heavy, with the smell of cut grass and distant barbecues. It didn't soothe me. It unsettled me further. I walked faster, past the complex courtyard, past the streetlight where Lucas once kissed me after our first snowstorm, past the corner deli where we used to get sandwiches after work. Every memory now felt counterfeit. I walked for nearly an hour before I realized I was crying. Not sobbing, silent tears, steady and relentless. Like my body was leaking pain it didn't know how to store anymore. When I finally returned home, the sun had shifted. The apartment looked dimmer, smaller. And my phone, the moment I plugged it back into the charger, lit up like a wildfire. 27 missed calls, more than 40 messages, names flashing across the screen. Lucas, Kira. Unknown number, probably Marissa. Lucas. I stared at the notifications with detached disbelief. Then I opened them one by one. Lucas. Hey babe, can you call me real quick? 1 minute later. Adelaide, answer your phone. 3 minutes later. Why did you email my boss? 5 minutes later. You're overreacting, just call me. 8 minutes. Are you kidding me? 10 minutes. You ruined my career. Then the shift. Please just talk to me. I can explain everything. Please. Addie? I locked the screen. I couldn't read anymore. Next, Kira. OMG, why are you stalking my Insta? You sent screenshots to his boss? Psycho much. Then. Okay, but I didn't know he told you he was working. That's between you guys. Don't drag me into it. Then the unknown number. Hey, this is Marissa. Lucas said you two were taking space, so whatever drama you're making right now is uncalled for. I almost laughed at that. Taking space? We were a month away from finalizing wedding invitations. My hands felt numb. I scrolled through more of Lucas's messages, each one more frantic, defensive, desperate. Then a final one. Lucas, Adelaide, please. I swear it's not what it looks like. Just talk to me, please. I put the phone face down on the table. I walked to the kitchen. I poured water. I didn't drink it. The room felt too quiet, too clean, too wrong. I opened my laptop again, unsure why. A new email had arrived, from Danielle. I hesitated before clicking, my heart beat in my throat. Adelaide, thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry you're going through this. This puts me in a difficult position professionally, but I appreciate your honesty. For what it's worth, I experienced something similar years ago. Please take care of yourself. Danielle. I covered my mouth, a choked sound escaping. The compassion in her message cut deeper than anger could. I wasn't alone, not entirely, but I also wasn't okay. And nothing about this was over, not by a long shot, because the truth had only begun unraveling. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Everything was muffled, distant. I moved through my routine as if I were watching someone else live my life, everything happening at half speed, yet with the weight of a full hurricane on my shoulders. I stayed at Lily's place. She offered me her bed, but I insisted on the couch. I couldn't sleep, not because I didn't want to, but because when my eyes closed, everything came rushing back. The conversations Lucas and I had, the future we'd built, all of it now seemed constructed from fragile lies. Lily didn't press. She let me sit in silence, only talking when she needed to. Her presence was comforting in a way Lucas never could have been in that moment. There was no guilt in her eyes, no betrayal to unpack. The storm of messages kept coming. I didn't check them right away. I couldn't. Each ping of my phone felt like a trigger, dragging me back into the mess I was trying to escape. But eventually, I had no choice. Lucas had texted me from multiple numbers. Lucas, please just let me explain. I swear I didn't mean for it to go this far, Lucas. Can we talk about this in person? I need to see you. I love you, Lucas. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Marissa and I were just talking. It wasn't what you think. Lucas, this is ruining my career. You're destroying us. Lucas, Addie, please. I'll do anything to fix this. Lucas, I swear I can explain. Please. Lucas, don't do this. Don't ruin everything. His messages were frantic, pleading, but in the few minutes I spent reading through them, I realized something. He was more concerned about losing his job than about losing me. He was more concerned about his public image than about the woman he'd promised to spend his life with. The man who had told me he'd do anything to make me happy was now trying to minimize the one thing that should have been the most important, our relationship. I didn't respond immediately. There was nothing to say to him. The emotional toll began to hit me harder than I'd expected. I went through the motions of the day, coffee, breakfast, aimless browsing through my phone. But nothing felt real. I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. It was on the third day, after a sleepless night, that Lucas showed up at Lily's apartment. He didn't text me beforehand, didn't ask if it was okay to come by. He just showed up, loud, insistent, and ready to fix things. Lily opened the door before I could. Her expression was neutral, but I could tell from the tightness in her jaw that she was pissed. She knew the devastation Lucas had caused. She knew me well enough to understand that what had happened wasn't something that could be smoothed over with a few words. But Lucas was already talking. "I'm so sorry. Please just listen to me," he said, pushing past Lily into the living room. "This isn't what you think, Addie. You have to believe me. Marissa and I were just—" "Don't," I interrupted, my voice colder than I thought I could manage. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to listen to more excuses. I've heard enough. But he didn't stop. He kept talking over me, as if drowning me out could somehow erase what I knew was true. As if his words could change the reality I had seen with my own eyes. "You don't understand, okay? This whole thing was a mistake. A huge, stupid mistake," Lucas continued, his eyes wide, pleading. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear to God, I didn't mean to." His voice cracked on the last sentence, but I wasn't swayed. I wasn't buying it. "You lied to me," I said, my voice steady but fierce. "You lied to your boss. You lied to me about where you were. You lied about everything. And now you're standing here telling me it was a mistake?" Yes, that's exactly what it was," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "But I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to hurt you. I made a mistake, Addie. Can't you see that?" His words hung in the air, heavy with guilt. But instead of pity, I felt a simmering anger, bubbling under the surface. "You did lose me, Lucas," I said, my voice now breaking through the walls I'd built. "You lied to me. And the worst part is, you think I'm just supposed to forgive you. You think I'm supposed to let this go like it's no big deal." I shook my head, disgust and disbelief mixing. "I can't. I won't. Not after everything." He opened his mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You had every opportunity to tell me the truth," I said. "You could have been honest with me from the start, but you chose to hide it. You chose her, and now you're here, asking me to fix it." "No, Lucas. I'm done fixing things that weren't broken in the first place." There was silence between us, thick and suffocating. Lucas's face twisted in frustration, his hand running through his hair in that nervous habit I'd come to associate with his stress. "I never meant for things to go this far," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I could have both." Both. There it was, the thing I'd been avoiding saying to myself. He had wanted both, me and her. The stability of our relationship, the life we'd planned, while still holding on to the excitement of something else. Something less real, less grounded. And when the choice came, when it truly mattered, he picked the safety of the lie over the risk of honesty. I had always believed we were a team, that we were partners in every sense of the word, but now I saw the truth in sharp, painful clarity. Lucas had never been playing on the same team. I turned away from him, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders for the first time in days. The anger wasn't gone yet, but it was being replaced by something sharper, clarity. "I need you to leave," I said. "This isn't just about the weekend. It's about everything. The trust, the lies, all of it." I looked at Lily and she nodded, silently agreeing to my decision. Lucas's face fell, but there was no sympathy in me now. He had used up the last of it. "I'm done, Lucas," I repeated, turning away from him. "I need space. You don't get to come in here and play the victim anymore." He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't let him. He didn't deserve my voice, not anymore. I didn't look back as he left. I didn't care about the promises he whispered behind me. I didn't care about his regret or his apologies. What mattered now was what I was going to do next. And the first thing I was going to do was stop living in the shadow of someone else's lies. Lucas left Lily's apartment that day, but the fallout stayed behind, settling over everything like a fine layer of dust I couldn't wipe away. The kind that clings, no matter how much you scrub. I didn't hear from him again for nearly 24 hours. That was rare for Lucas. He was the type who needed to control a narrative, needed to convince you he was the one hurting more. So his silence wasn't peace, it was strategy. A pause before another wave. But I wasn't waiting for him anymore. By Monday, I had to return to our apartment. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Bills were due. Mail had piled up. My laptop charger was still on the nightstand next to the side of the bed he used to warm. The dread hit before I even unlocked the door. The moment I stepped inside, the place felt foreign, wrong, like I'd walked into a stranger's home filled with the ghost of my own life. The kitchen counter still had Lucas's half-used protein shaker. The couch still had his hoodie tossed across the back. The faint scent of his cologne, clean cedar, and something faintly citrus still clung to the fabric of the cushions. And everywhere I looked, I saw memories. The wall where we'd planned to hang our engagement photos. The table where we'd argued about seating charts. The hallway where he'd kissed me after the proposal, whispering, "This is just the beginning." I stood in the middle of the living room and felt grief hit me like a sudden wave. Sharp, quick, uncontrollable. It wasn't grief for him. It was grief for the version of myself who believed in him. I forced myself to breathe. Then I rolled my suitcase out of the closet and began packing the things that were unquestionably mine. Halfway through gathering toiletries, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Lucas, I'm coming by. We need to talk about the lease and about us." About us. The irony was almost insulting. I didn't respond. I didn't want another argument in the apartment that had once felt like home, but Lucas had never believed in boundaries that didn't serve him. So an hour later, I heard his key turn in the lock. He stepped inside, looking exhausted and unshaven, like the consequences had finally begun to catch up to him. But instead of remorse, the first words out of his mouth were, "You told Danielle everything." A statement, not a question, and not a single, "How are you?" or "I'm sorry." Just blame. I straightened. I told her the truth. You dragged me into your lie without asking. Lucas scoffed, digging his fingers into his hair. I didn't drag you into anything. You didn't have to respond to her. You made things so much worse. I didn't lie to anyone, I shot back. You did. Multiple times. He paced across the living room, a harsh laugh escaping. Do you know how humiliating it was? To be confronted by HR? To have Danielle pull me aside and ask me why my fiancé sent her screenshots? You told her you were going to a funeral, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You told me you were working. You lied on both ends. He turned to me then, eyes blazing. I made a mistake, Addie. People make mistakes all the time. This wasn't a mistake, I said, voice steadying. This was a chain of choices you made. A weekend trip with your ex isn't a slip-up. It's a decision. He flinched. But then came the inevitable deflection. You're being dramatic. This whole thing is blown out of proportion. He shook his head. You don't understand what happened. Oh, I think I do. No, Lucas insisted, stepping closer. You don't understand how unhappy I've been. For months. You don't understand how trapped I felt. With the wedding, with everything. I stiffened. Trapped? He paused, realizing too late that he'd said the wrong thing. That's not what I meant. You're so focused on planning and organizing, and sometimes it feels like there's no room for me to just breathe. I stared at him in disbelief. So you needed to breathe, and the solution was, Marissa? That's not fair, he muttered. No. I took a step toward him. Then explain it to me. Explain why you told her we were taking space. Explain why you lied about where you were. Explain why you risked everything for a weekend fling. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His eyes drifted away. And that was the answer. He didn't have one. Not one that would make it better. Not one that would undo what he'd done. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees. I wasn't ready for marriage, Addie, he admitted quietly. I kept telling myself I'd get there, but I don't know, I panicked. There it was. The truth, not the truth I needed, but the truth I'd expected. I swallowed hard. So instead of being honest, you created a double life. He didn't respond. A thick silence settled between us. Heavy, final. It doesn't matter anymore, I said. We need to talk about the lease. He blinked, almost offended by the shift in tone. What? The lease, I repeated. It's in both our names. And I'm not staying here. You're leaving? He asked, as if it wasn't the natural conclusion. Of course I'm leaving. I gestured around us. Everything in this apartment is built on a lie. He looked around slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. Fine. he finally said, voice hollow. I'll stay. We can figure out how to split the rent. I'm not keeping my name on a lease for a place I don't live in, I said. We'll draft a written agreement. You'll sign it, and we'll have 60 days to get my name off the paperwork. He nodded numbly, defeated. For a moment, he looked like a boy, not a man, sitting in the ruins of his own choices. My grandmother's engagement ring sat on the coffee table, small and delicate. He pushed it toward me. You should take this, he said. I never meant... I know, I said softly, but it didn't change anything. I slipped the ring into my pocket. It felt heavier than it should. You really want this to be over? He asked, voice cracking. Yes, I whispered. I do. He looked like he'd been hit, but he didn't protest. He knew he'd lost me long before I said the words. I gathered my things quietly. Clothes, documents, my laptop, the mug Lily bought me, the blanket I'd had since college. I left behind the shared furniture, the dishes we bought on sale, the couch we'd chosen together. They felt contaminated. When I rolled my suitcase out the door, Lucas didn't stop me. He didn't chase me. He didn't say he'd change. He just sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. And I knew in that moment that the relationship had died long before I discovered the truth. It had been dying in the places where honesty was replaced by convenience, where promises were replaced by secrets, where silence had replaced love. I closed the door behind me. It didn't feel like leaving him. It felt like returning to myself. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It's more like a graph that spikes upward one day, then drops off a cliff the next. Sometimes I woke up feeling strangely light, as if the weight of Lucas's betrayal had finally slid off my shoulders. Other days, I felt like I was drowning in all the what-ifs. What if I'd confronted him sooner? What if I'd noticed the signs? What if I'd loved him differently? But those questions never led anywhere except back to the same truth. He had chosen the lie long before I discovered it. I moved into a temporary sublet 2 weeks after leaving Lucas. A small one-bedroom with thin walls, a kitchen sink that sputtered when turned to hot, and a faint smell of lavender detergent from the last tenant. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. More importantly, nothing inside it reminded me of him. My 2 cats, Hazel and Juniper, adjusted quickly. Hazel claimed the windowsill as her throne. Juniper curled herself into the warm corner behind the couch. Their uncomplicated existence grounded me in ways I hadn't expected. They didn't care about betrayal, or leases, or broken promises. They just wanted food, sunlight, and affection. I envied them sometimes. The first month was the hardest. Every errand felt strange. Every grocery store, every sidewalk bench, every familiar street corner reminded me of the life I was supposed to be living. The apartment I should have been shopping for, the wedding I should have been planning. My friends supported me as best they could, but it was Lily who anchored me. She didn't push me to talk, didn't tell me to move on or stay positive. Instead, she sat with me in silence on nights when tears came without warning. She listened when I needed to confess things I didn't want to admit. I'm not just angry, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe I didn't see it. I hate that he got to decide when our future ended. Lily would always respond with the same quiet certainty. Adelaide, betrayal doesn't make you foolish. It makes the other person a coward. I held onto those words like a lifeline. As the weeks passed, the chaos with Lucas settled into something almost mechanical. We had to formalize our apartment arrangement. He agreed to stay, and I insisted on a written contract, drafted with the help of a lawyer friend, that outlined his responsibility for rent until my name could be removed from the lease. He signed it reluctantly, not out of decency, but because there was no other choice. By the end of the second month, our only communication was about logistics, and honestly, I preferred it that way. The unexpected part was Danielle. I assumed her email of sympathy would be our last communication. After all, she was Lucas's boss. She had no obligation to comfort me, and the situation was awkward enough already. But a week after I moved out, she reached out again, this time from her personal email. Danielle, hey, Adelaide, you don't owe me a reply, but I wanted to check in. Work has been rough since everything came to light, and I imagine it's been even harder for you. If you ever want to grab a coffee and talk about work transitions, or just life, I'm around. It was surprisingly tender, and strangely grounding. I didn't respond right away, but a few days later, after a brutal therapy session where I'd cried harder than I expected, I found myself typing back. Me. Coffee sounds nice. Not about Lucas, just perspective. Thank you. We met at a quiet cafe near the river. Danielle was exactly as I remembered. Composed, kind, sharp-eyed. She ordered chamomile tea. I ordered black coffee. We didn't talk about Lucas at first. It felt like stepping around broken glass. Instead, she asked about my work, my future plans. She told me about her efforts to improve her company's workplace culture after going through her own messy divorce a decade ago. It felt strange talking to her like a peer instead of Lucas's boss, but also comforting, refreshingly adult, safe. We parted after an hour with a simple, mutual understanding. We were two women who had survived something painful and understood the language of loss. Life took on a new rhythm, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. I adopted a second cat, a tiny orange tabby with a crooked ear and a fierce spirit. I named her Maple. Hazel hated her. Juniper tolerated her. I adored her. I started journaling again for the first time since college. Not poetry like before, just thoughts, frustrations, hopes, things I didn't want to say out loud. Work helped. The routine was grounding. But after a few months, I realized I was craving something more, a change, a new challenge, something to rebuild myself with, something that wasn't tied to the same office I'd worked in throughout my entire relationship with Lucas. And then, in late spring, another email arrived from Danielle. Danielle, a position opened at my brother's consulting firm. It's more aligned with your background than the last one I sent you. Zero obligation. Just thought of you immediately. I stared at the email for nearly an hour. Last time she'd sent something similar, months earlier, I wasn't ready. The wounds were too fresh. My life too unstable. But now, something inside me sparked. Hope, ambition, maybe even excitement. I applied. The interview process was rigorous, but invigorating. During the final round, I learned something that sent a chill down my spine. Lucas had applied to the same firm earlier that year and had been rejected. Danielle hadn't explicitly orchestrated it, but her reference check was honest. Actions and consequences. The job offer came 2 weeks later. A significant raise, better hours, new environment, new beginning. I accepted. On the day I submitted my 2-week notice at my old job, I walked out of the building feeling lighter, freer, like I had finally stepped fully into this new version of my life. And for the first time in nearly a year, I didn't think about Lucas at all. Not when I made dinner, not when I fed the cats, not when I crawled into bed with a book. The chapter of us was closing, quietly, fully, without ceremony. What I didn't know yet was that life had one more twist waiting, something gentle this time, something good. But that would come later. For now, the most important thing was this. I'd finally left the ruins behind. And the worst parts of my story were no longer the ones defining me. It's funny how, sometimes, the hardest part of moving forward isn't leaving the past behind. It's learning to embrace the new, the unfamiliar, the uncomfortable quiet that comes when you finally let go of the people and places that have defined your world for so long. I was no longer the woman who had shared a life with Lucas. I was no longer the fiancé who had built a future around a story of love and trust that had been ripped apart. But sometimes it takes breaking into 1,000 pieces to finally see the shape of who you are meant to be. The first few months after I took the job at the consulting firm felt like a blur. Everything moved fast. My new responsibilities, new coworkers, new routines. The days blurred together with meetings, deadlines, and training sessions that stretched long into the evenings. But the more I immersed myself in my work, the more I found pieces of myself that had been buried under the weight of my old life. The version of me who had lived with Lucas was heavy, constantly worried about things she couldn't control. The new version of me? She was lighter, more aware of her own strength. I wasn't doing this for him. I wasn't doing this for anyone. I was doing this for me. Maple, my mischievous little cat, had been a silent source of comfort through it all. She'd jump onto my lap while I worked, pawing at my keyboard as if to remind me to stop and breathe. Hazel, ever the queen of the house, would lounge beside me, indifferent to the chaos that used to surround her. I had started to rebuild, not just my career, but my emotional life as well. I began seeing someone new, Ethan. He was a pediatric occupational therapist. A world away from Lucas's marketing background, and the simplicity of his honesty was both refreshing and comforting. There were no games with him, no lies, no hidden stories. When he said he was working, he was genuinely working. When he needed space, he told me directly. It was almost unnerving at first, but I quickly learned that there was beauty in his straightforwardness. We'd been seeing each other for a few months now, and while I wasn't ready to rush anything, I felt a sense of peace when I was with him. It was the kind of relationship where silence wasn't uncomfortable, where long pauses didn't need to be filled with excuses or distractions. We went on simple dates, weekend hikes, quiet dinners at the new Thai restaurant down the street. Nothing flashy, just honest, easy moments. One evening, after a dinner date at a cozy Italian spot, we walked along the riverfront, our shoes crunching on the gravel beneath us. The night was cool, the breeze teasing at the edges of my hair. I glanced at Ethan, and for the first time in a long while, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for where I was in life. The past still lived in my memories. The scars from Lucas's betrayal hadn't disappeared. They never would. But they didn't define me anymore. They had become part of my story, yes, but not the whole of it. My life wasn't a tragedy. It was a journey, and the next chapter was already unfolding before me. Ethan stopped walking for a moment, turning to face me. "How do you feel about everything?" he asked, his voice soft, yet direct. I stopped too, catching his gaze. There was no judgment in his eyes, just openness. A willingness to listen. It was so different from the conversations I'd had with Lucas, so different from the conversations that were always clouded with excuses. "I feel okay," I said, my voice steady. "I feel like I'm finally starting to trust myself again." He smiled, the warmth in his expression reaching his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that." We continued walking side by side in comfortable silence, and I realized something in that moment. I had finally come to terms with the past, not because I had forgotten it, but because I had let it go. Over the next few months, the pieces of my life continued to fall into place. I settled into my new role at work, and my confidence grew with each challenge I overcame. I began to feel a sense of ownership over my decisions. The path I was on was mine, not one dictated by someone else's choices. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon, I got a call from Danielle. "Adelaide, I wanted to check in. How are things going?" she asked, her voice warm but professional. We'd become friends, of sorts, after that first coffee meeting. She'd checked in every few weeks, nothing too intrusive, just a gesture of kindness in the midst of all the professional chaos. "I'm doing well, actually," I said, smiling as I watched the city skyline from my office window. "I'm happy, really. Things are different." "I'm glad to hear that. And listen, I know you've had a lot on your plate, but there's an opportunity that might be a good fit for you." The next few minutes of the conversation were a blur. She was offering me a new role, one in her brother's consulting firm, but with more responsibility and potential for growth. It was a step up from the position I had now. I didn't even have to think about it. My response was immediate. "I'd love to." It felt good, empowering. This was mine. This wasn't about Lucas or the past. This was about me and my future, about carving a place where I could thrive on my own terms. It had been nearly a year since I left Lucas, and as I stood in front of the mirror that evening, preparing for a work event, I realized how far I'd come. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had walked out of the apartment that day. She was different, stronger, wiser, more sure of herself than ever before. The vulnerability she once carried had evolved into something else, something more resilient. She wasn't looking back anymore. She was looking forward. Ethan was already waiting downstairs, his smile wide as he handed me my coat. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it would be full of possibilities I hadn't even dreamed of yet. When we walked out of the building that night, the city lights flickering in the distance, I realized that the worst day of my life had become the starting point for everything good that was to come. The road ahead was mine to choose, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk it alone.